Warbird Tube webinar for this evening. I'm your host, Steve Buss, and very glad that you could join us tonight. Remember, during our presentation, if you have any questions, just type them in the chat box. We'll save time at the end to make sure we get all those questions answered before we let our guests go tonight. And speaking of our guests, joining us from the CAF Minnesota wing is Mitch Bertrang and Amy Loria. And they're going to talk about a favorite airplane of theirs, the B-25 Miss Mitchell. So good evening, Mitch and Amy. Welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Well, of course, we know all about the B-25, right? Everyone knows the history of the B-25 and, of course, the Doolittle raid on Tokyo in 1942. That's what really put the airplane on the map, as it were. But the B-25 itself served not only in Europe, but also in the Pacific through the entire war. And it's always nice to point out one of our favorite CAF members, Lieutenant Colonel Dick Cole, was the co-pilot on the Doolittle raid, and he was a strong supporter not only of the B-25 community, but of CAF throughout the years. And I know he also had the opportunity to ride on Miss Mitchell several years ago.
Yes, he did. Yeah, that was a treat for us.
Well, let's go back in time a little bit. We're looking at historic photos. This is Miss Mitchell in World War II.
Yeah. So we started with just a couple photos of what Miss Mitchell looked like during the war, and we tried to recreate our B-25 to look very similar, if not almost the same. Mitch, would you say?
There's a little bit of artistic license we have to do, but yeah, it's very close.
Yeah, and so Miss Mitchell was in the 310th Bomb Group, which was deactivated in 1945. But the gentleman in the, and I don't have a pointer, but the gentleman in the lower photo on the right-hand side is Ray Osley, and he was one of our members in the 80s when we received the B-25, and kind of an integral part of why we chose the name Miss Mitchell and to model our B-25 after this airplane. And this is another crew photo. One of our members was nice enough to digitize or to colorize this photo. This wasn't Ray's crew. I believe this was a different crew, but we have so many great historical photos that we're hoping to put out kind of in a virtual museum that we're working on, so people can kind of look forward to that. And then this is another one. This is of all of the B-25s in the 310th. On one of their bombing missions. Just another neat historical photo. And so the upper photo is Miss Mitchell during the war, and the bottom one is Miss Mitchell at an air show a few years ago with a couple of our volunteers and members. I just kind of wanted to show the pictures here so that you can really see the work that went into making sure that she looks as historically accurate as we can possibly make her. And Mitch, yeah, you do a lot of work on the airplane, so.
And I'd say, the only difference would be after the war, all the armor plating was taken out of these airplanes and it was removed. So when you look at the photo, that's really the only thing that's different. The original black and white, you'll see that large plate up there to protect the crew members that was made out of aluminum. That's the only thing. Otherwise, it's spot on. The artwork, the artist that painted the nose art, everything.
So this is one of the photos, and I wish I had some more time to grab more of them. But this is one of the photos when we got Miss Mitchell, the B-25. It was donated to us by Dr. Kundal of Rice Lake, Wisconsin, and in 1980, we started the restoration process, which took 12 years before she flew. So anybody out there restoring an airplane, if it's taking you a while, don't worry. And we had most of our volunteers and members at the time were World War II veterans. They were mechanics. They worked at Northwest or North Central, I guess, at the time, and the National Air Guard as well. So they were all very skilled, but parts are hard to find. So this is one of the original photos. Mitch, you had an interesting fact, though, about when we first got the airplane.
Well, it's kind of interesting. There was a symposium or a get-together a number of years back, and the question was posed to the panel, and there were some of the original restorers that were around. Why did it take so long? And they had said that wasn't the plan. It was supposed to be remove the paint, get it back, and stuff. But as he said, with some expletives, every time they opened up a panel, they found another problem. And That's why it ended up being a full teardown restoration. It took 12 years. And, you know, we're fortunate maybe that is the way it turned out, because it was a beautiful restoration and really gave us a nice canvas to work with for our continued restoration, which has been going on for over 40 years now.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of neat to see the progression of it. We had a similar thing with the Navigon. We got it and realized that, oh, there's a little bit more work going into this. So I have kind of a neat story. My grandpa, he's down in the bottom left. I'd say the guy with the hat on, but they both have hats on. He's the farther left. He actually did the original wiring on Miss Mitchell. So I kind of grew up hanging out, learning stories, getting to crawl around inside the aircraft before I really knew how cool of a thing it was to be part of the museum. So I feel very fortunate that I got to kind of see it in the process. You know, I was little, so I don't remember a ton from the 80s and the early 90s, but it was kind of a neat thing to be a part of.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
as we're, go ahead, Mitch.
I was just going to say, and as we kind of go along here and you look at the photos, you know, look at that. There's going to be a photo when she took first flight, and just notice there was no turret. There was no aft turret in there. It was just a beautiful, shiny shell, and that's all it was. Like I said, this blank canvas that we've been working on and painting ever since. Go ahead.
Just because we're looking at the nose art here, that's different than what she carries today, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So originally, one of our kind of logos or charters of the wing was frozen assets, because we're up in Minnesota and it's cold. And they started kind of down the path of putting this on the side of the airplane, and the staff kind of got to talking to some of the World War II veterans and talking to Ray Osley, who was the crew chief on the original Miss Mitchell during the war and also volunteered with us. And, you know, I worked on Miss Mitchell, you know, I was the crew chief. And so it kind of just became this obvious thing that they needed to recreate a real life airplane and actually tell a real life story. And I'm so glad that they did, because there's so much rich history with the actual crew and airplane of Miss Mitchell. So shortly after, you know, they took the nose art off and started down the path of Miss Mitchell. And this photo, so Ray is the second one in on the left, and Gene Andriotti was the wing leader, I believe, at the time. If Jerry Hahn is watching, maybe he can chime in and correct me. But they were two of our World War II veterans. And then Kowalik did the original nose art during the war, and they actually had him come back to do the nose art on Miss Mitchell once the restoration was complete. So that's also a really, really cool piece of history that we have a tie to. And after he passed away, Miss Mitchell needed a little bit of touch up, so we had his daughter come back and do that for us. So it's just so cool that, you know, every little piece of history that we can include on this airplane, we have.
And you'll notice the art behind me. So the Miss Mitchell, the flying, the Vargas, is from a gatefold from a 1943 Esquire magazine, and that art shows up on other airplanes. It was a relatively popular. But what Kowalik did that was different is he took, let me put my hand, he took the scarf off of it, because my understanding was originally they were going to be putting the bombing missions on that side, and it ended up going on the other side. So that was the story, at least I heard, of why that flowing scarf disappeared in the nose artwork. Oh,
interesting. And Ray talked a couple of times too about why they chose Miss Mitchell, and that's, I think, one of the big questions that we always get, which is kind of interesting. You know, you could ask anything, and people always ask about the nose art. So Ray told me a couple of things, and I don't know if it's because he was trying to keep it PC or not, but the one was that they wanted the bombs to miss the Mitchell. So they, you know, picked the nose art. And the other one that I got most of the time was that he wanted a classy lady on the side of his airplane. And then he'd laugh and, you know, and they kind of walk away. But either story is just fine.
Well, and how just absolutely awesome it is to be able to talk to him and hear his stories, and then be able to put that into the airplane, and then you know, obviously it continues to grow and to live on, and stories that you can share with this generation and future generations.
Absolutely, yeah. And he passed away a few years ago now, but we're so grateful that we could have, and all of the World War II veterans, that we could share a little bit of their story, you know, through this airplane. And we still keep in touch with Ray's family as well, and a lot of the World War II veterans that were members. So we're very lucky. But this photo is really cool. It's actually the very first flight that they did with Miss Mitchell. And there's a little bit of speculation on the date, but we're going with April 18th, 1992. So 50 years to the day of the Doolittle raid. And it was very, very exciting from what I understand. They had a lot going on that day. Let's see, there was a couple. So the maiden flight occurred at approximately 3:39 p.m. And the crew consisted of Colonel Randy Sohn and Colonel Larry Mullally, both who are no longer with us, sadly. And they flew over the Mississippi River for 23 minutes. And I guess they ended up going to home and field for a little bit, where they kind of stopped and inspected stuff. I mean, after 12 years of restoration, I probably want to stop and inspect and make sure everything was okay too. And then they kept on going, and I believe they flew for another 2 hours, 90 minutes to 2 hours, before they landed again. But it was a successful first mission.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that you weren't able to come across one of the photos of when it first got here. It was just this kind of oxidized green. Yeah, it's quite a transformation.
There are some photos on our Facebook page. If anybody follows us, you can kind of dig through. I think we've got a Miss Mitchell folder on there. But yeah, it's amazing to see where it was to what it is now.
Yeah.
And this is Ray and Harold Weiss. And Ray is just so proud. That's when the engines started up, and the minute she took off, I mean, I think he even got a little tear down the side of his face, and you could hear everybody just yelling and hollering and so excited, because, you know, it was 12 years of their labor of love going into this airplane to see it finally take off. And it was an exciting moment. And this is one of my favorite photos. So this is Miss Mitchell today, and Mitch mentioned the bombing missions, and you can see them on the side of the airplane. Mitch, do you want to talk about that a little bit, and like why we have those specific numbers? Because we get that question a lot.
Yeah, well, it was when they got their unit citation, it was over 130 successful missions, but the key was they didn't have any fatalities on this aircraft. And you know, that's pretty extraordinary. Yes, there were some that went further than that, but there was an awful lot that never got to that stage. And it was truly a blessed aircraft with 3 crews that ended up rotating through it. That's really something. And
no fatality.
They did lose 1 crew member on a different B-25, but not on Miss Mitchell. So this one, as you can see, has the turret on, so it's a more recent one.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Just another in-flight photo, because she's the pretty airplane.
Definitely is.
Yeah.
Now, so the first flight was, you said 1992. So when we look back at those original pictures, we're not seeing the turrets and a lot of the other equipment that was on the airplane, or that is on the airplane today. So the initial restoration was 12 years to get it in the air, and now since then you've been working pretty hard to get the rest of the airplane almost back to factory new condition.
Yeah, and so here's what's kind of interesting. If you look at our B-25, let's say, versus a different one, you know, when this airplane arrived, you know, in that Italian theater, the Corsica, that area, obviously it's pretty warm, so they removed the de-icing boots, they removed the heaters, they removed a lot in this airplane. It wasn't going to do high altitude. Cheek packs were gone, that sort of thing, because it's all wasted weight. So as we're doing our restoration, we're doing it like Miss Mitchell was. So if somebody puts their head up there and kind of wonders, why is it missing stuff? Because Miss Mitchell didn't have it. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the restoration as we go along here. So this is just a beautiful shot. Actually, part of it was taken this morning in the hangar. It's a B-25J. It's got the greenhouse. The shot up on top is one that we took on the many missions that we go on, air shows and that sort of thing. Now, the wonderful thing about this aircraft is we have a fully functional Norton bomb sight, the gyros, everything works in it. And we can actually drop ordnance with the aircraft. The bombardier can release them. We have the ability, the solenoids work. So, I always tell people, more often than not, if you see it on the airplane, it works. Now, we don't have things, we don't have an autopilot or anything like that, but it could theoretically work. And we'll go to the next photo. So, the one thing that we're really proud of is the fact that we have a Bendex turret. So, in the Warbird community, sometimes you have to do artistic license to make things happen. So it's not a Martin turret. A lot of B-25s, if they do have turrets, they don't work, or they're shells, that sort of thing. So you probably have seen on Facebook or on YouTube the videos that we've done with it. So it will rotate 360. The 50 cals go up and down. The 50 cals aren't real, obviously, but they were perfectly real. So it's really, really extraordinary. It was beautifully restored, and it's treated with kid gloves. The amplodines are still functional. The only thing that we would have left to do on that is there's some foot pedals that we'd like to have CNC'd or made, or if we could find them. So right now we have pegs, but for the most part, it's 99% complete, which is really extraordinary.
I think a cool thing to note too, or kind of an interesting thing, is obviously if you've been in a Warbird, you know how small they are and how much smaller people were back then. And that top turret is very, very snug. There's not a lot of wiggle room up there.
Yeah, it's not built for my shoulders. I get in there, if you put something on there or whatever, but it's definitely built for a young man that's 140 to 150 pounds. And you know what? It's not very pleasant either. It's extremely loud as you're rotating and that air is coming through. It's not a pleasant place to be. I can't imagine being up there for hours. It'd be terrible. So this is a view of the aft section. We have a functional Bell electric hydraulic rear turret, which is really something, and it does go up and down and left and right. Restoration-wise, it doesn't have the armor plating. Like I said, all the armor plating is always taken out of these. So that's a long-term project to get the armor plating fabricated and installed. And then there's also the phenolic, the chutes for the ammo, and that comes back and then it articulates. And would love to get those in, but that's all about somebody writing a substantial check to make that happen, because that's going to be quite a restoration project. And at some point we will hopefully accomplish that, but it's pretty amazing to actually have a fully functional bell turret. So obviously we're in the cockpit right now. You can get a really beautiful view. Again, that was just taken today because I wanted to have some really nice recent photos. So you see that arrow on the left-hand side, and we're talking about restoration at this point. We've been doing it for 40 years and we're not done yet. So our plan here, as I reach over, is I just actually ended up getting the tuning cables. Here's one of them. So hopefully this year, probably this summer, we're going to start to install the tuning cables and then recreate all the wiring harnesses that go to those. Those are the controllers for the command radios. And you controlled them, and the tuning cables went off behind you to the command radios. What we don't want is just boxes bolted to the airplane. That doesn't make any sense. So we're at the stage now of doing those small little putsy little details, and they're a lot of fun. And we have a really passionate restoration team, and different people are doing different things that they're comfortable with their skill sets, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. And we'll go to the next photo. So this one is just the view of our bomb bay. It really is quite extraordinary. We have the arming solenoids. The bomb releases, the solenoids work. Hanging up on top there are two twin fused 250-pound iron bombs. One of our members today was polishing the doors. Actually started out as a cadet when he was, what, 12 years old?
You're talking about Carter?
Yeah.
He showed up well before he was 12.
Yeah. And you know, he's planning on being an AMP, and just a really fantastic young man. And that's what we love to see is, you know, when you can work with youth and you help to mentor them and bring them along and stuff. So he'll be a great mechanic. The guy has just got eagle eyes. So I just think this is a fantastic view of our bomb bay. It's really, really well restored. And the small little things, like I said, the arming solenoids and things that aren't typically in a B-25, they're in Miss Mitchell.
It just makes a world of difference too, those little details.
Yeah, all the stenciling, everyone is per the North American plans.
Yeah, I was just going to mention the stenciling, not only in the bomb bay, but throughout the airplane. That's really that final almost touch of authenticity that you put into the restoration.
Yeah, one of the members took on that daunting task, I would say, about 3 years ago. We got the cutters and everything, and you know, you had to prime it, paint it, you know, many times paint it twice, and all the stencils, if you walk around, because it's kind of interesting if you look at Warbird, sometimes they have them, sometimes they don't. And Miss Mitchell has what do they call it, flair, all over the place. So this is kind of neat. There's not a lot of these around. This is a K-24 bomb assessment camera. We got that out of Europe a number of years ago, and we were able to acquire the window, put the window in a couple of years ago, and one of our members, who's an amazing machinist and the most humble person I've ever met, he made all the brackets and everything for it off the original plans. And it's so funny, you talk to him, it's like, wow, you know, I'm just blown away by this. And he's just like, well, I don't know. I mean, it really wasn't that hard. I don't know. Just super humble. So this gives us the two views for you to see, which most people don't get to see them both side by side. Currently not functioning. It's totally functional. We just don't have it wired up yet. But our plan is to wire it up and be able to take large format photos with it. Now, in wartime conditions, they did some alterations on it. They found that sand and dirt and all that got in there. So where Miss Mitchell was, it wasn't uncommon for those airplanes to do a mod, remove the glass and put in an aluminum panel that they would pull out when they needed to take the photos and then cover it back up. Because you can imagine in desert conditions, that glass didn't stay see-through for very long.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note too that the camera that we got actually came in the original box from World War II.
Yeah, it had the desiccant and everything. And as we're sitting there, I was going to show you another restoration thing. So as the virus was doing its thing this winter, you can see the seats. So there's a seat above that ended up getting fractured. Now, mind you, these are wooden seats that were made in 1944 and 43. So I took it upon myself and was asked to recreate them. So ended up taking with the original North American plans and recreated, which was it was a lot to bite off from the plans. And I'll tell you, working on these really opened my eyes to what amazing work the folks did at North American Aviation. The wood that they used, where it needed to be strong, was finer grain, was a little bit heavier. Where it didn't need to be was light. It was dulled together. 1/16 of an inch plywood is all this is mahogany 3-ply. It's extraordinarily light, and I don't even know if this picture will show, but you see this channel in here? They took the channel out, and I recreated it, put the dowels in there in order to save those few grams, that 1 ounce of weight, because those ounces add up in a B-25 or any other aircraft and stuff. So I wanted to show our viewers this because I think it's just absolutely amazing. As I got into this, it kind of blew me away. It wasn't just looking at the plans, but when you started assembling it, you're like, this is brilliant, the way they were done, because they're originally made out of magnesium. And can you imagine how expensive these seats and critical war materials? But now you've got furniture manufacturers in the Carolinas and, you know, where that epicenter was, that are making seats for B-25s and other aircraft.
Just as a trivia point, is what kind of film goes in those cameras? What size or format?
I don't remember if that's a 4-inch. I would be kind of shooting for the hip, but I mean, it's large format. It's about yay big.
Okay.
and my understanding is you can still get it developed. So that's our real dream, is to be able to get the film, do the black and whites. I mean, how fun would that be at an air show to be able to do an overflight at the airport and have it from a bomb assessment camera?
Right.
Yeah. We had somebody donate a box of decommissioned photos from a camera like that, not necessarily from a B-25, but it was amazing, just the photos that they had. D-Day, I think, was one of them. So like the ships going up to the beach, and it was just, and all the people, it was pretty incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Random facts. Jim says it's 5x5 film. I got a line on.
We're going to be texting back and forth with Jim.
Yeah.
So the view of the aft section of our B-25, and a couple of years ago, we were able to have the shelves made for the ammo boxes, because everything kind of has to go in order. And then also, if you look above those, you'll see those kind of elliptical devices. Those are the spring assemblies. One of our restorers took and assembled all those, tensioned them, and they're the lines and the springs that hold the 50 cals. But this is, I'm bringing you along in a story here on why I'm showing you this. And then right behind would be where those phenolic feed chutes, the ones that I told you they kind of twist and articulate, they would be in back. And there was actually a ladder on the right-hand side, or in this view, the left-hand side, that was put in on them. And they were, you know, once they got into the combat situation, they were all removed, because why would you be humping a, you know, carrying a ladder around? So, so yeah, so next photo. So this photo is kind of interesting. We went through, and I was fortunate enough to be part of the team working on it. We put in the aft armor plating. We recreated that, because the armor plating, then other things attached to it. Then you can have feed chutes and all that. And you know what? They look like just a couple of pieces of metal. And it's kind of like the seats. Once you got into it, you found out just how complicated and how brilliant, to the point of doing things like stitch welding. So instead of doing a continuous weld, let's save that time, let's save those materials, we'll do a stitch weld in spots. And we recreated all that also, and made the hinges and everything for it. So you'll notice it's a little bit lighter green. Some of that's the photo flash. It is just a slightly lighter, the Miss Mitchell paint and the original North American Aviation paint is just a very, very slight hue, but it's not that dramatic in reality. So in that previous photo, you could see the radio rack in here, and this was a collaborative effort with the Warbirds of Glory Museum and Patrick Mahalik, his folks over there, fantastic folks. So we worked with them, and they actually created the radio rack for us. You know, it's really important that we collaborate with other operators. Also, for example, the B-25 History Project, and that's where we were able to talk with some of these Rosies and Ron, the Riveters, and they have a great database and resources there that have helped us with some photos. So I wanted to make sure I kind of did a little shout out to those folks, because it's been awesome working with them, and it really has helped us along in our restoration. So as you can see in that, we recreated all the conductors, the harnesses, the antennas, and in fact, even found the insulators, the 82s and the 81s. If you look up in the top, it's those little details and following the original North American plan. So if I could have you look over the radio, you'd see an awful lot behind it. And when our guests come on the airplane, I think they're going to be pretty impressed, because all that happened this year. So you're probably saying, why am I seeing this photo? So if you kind of look in the center there, that's the comm box. But the B-25s also had some small brackets. And within that bracket, there was a mic switch. And this kind of gnarled up mess here that you see, it was worn on a lanyard over your neck. And that way you can control, and you'd be able to talk on your throat mic. Then we also have the filters. And these were the high-low impedance that went on there. And everything hooked up on there. So I wanted to show you what it looks like there on the left side of the aircraft. And then these components are going to get handed off to our restoration team, and somebody else will be picking up that, and we'll be installing it on the right side. So all those little spaces in the nooks and crannies were actually kind of filled with different things. There's also a mic switch on our 50 cals, and those conductors and all those lines were run this year. So I thought it was kind of an important photo because it's the details that really make the difference as we go along here. So this is over the bomb bay, another restoration project. As I kind of talk about our journey here, on the left side, you'll see kind of a short handrail. The B-25s had two different lengths, our original airframe and then what Miss Mitchell was. That is way too short. It was cut down somewhere. We discovered that. So we're having the three brackets made, and we're going to take it back to the Miss Mitchell. Already have the correct aluminum handrail pipes, and one of our members made the maple plugs because they're actually maple. And interesting enough, and strangely, it's only on that left pipe in one section, and we also replaced them underneath in the crawl space. Don't quite know why North American did it that way, but the next time you see it in about 3 to 6 months, that will be restored back to what it should be. So I put this picture in here because I know we have a lot of people that are passionate about warbirds. So that's the Rebecca. See that little arrow? So it's a low frequency trailing antenna, and I've been able to work with some other folks on this restoration project. One part that we're missing is the MC163 or MC163A, and it's a bracket that goes on top of that phenolic tube. And we're looking for that. It's kind of one of those really, really rare, but if somebody has one in their garage, their basement, they've been sitting on it on a shelf, we would love to, if you want to donate it, it would have a great home, or if you know somebody that wants to sell one of them, we're definitely interested in that particular part. And that would finish off the whole Rebecca and the radio rack project, is just that one piece. So here's another arrow for you. And this is kind of an exciting one. So these aircraft, and it wasn't just B-25s, plenty of them had IFFs, identify friend or foe. So I'm going to turn my camera here for the folks. And we were able to get one of these. One of our members donated the funds in order for us to procure this. And we even have all the plugs and pretty much everything we need for this. It's going to go through a restoration process. It'll get new wrinkle paint, and everything will be put back to kind of close to new. We don't want it to look like it just rolled out of the factory. That's going to go on that shelf. We are still looking for two parts for that project. One would be the mount for it, which is a FT247, if somebody happens to know where one of those is floating around. We'd rather not have to try to recreate it if we don't have to. And then there was a plug that's kind of a rare plug, and it's called it's a PL177, and it's a small Bakelite plug, and it was used for, the IFF had a detonator in it. So if the inertia switch was pushed off to one side, because it needed, I think it was approximately 9 Gs, that would initiate the destruction of the IFF, and there was a charge in there that would destroy the internal components. So that kind of completes that. Obviously, we don't have the charge or anything like that, but we want to try to get it back to what it was, including there's a small bracket that we're going to fabricate. When you saw the picture there, we also put in the terminal strips, which is on the other side, because everything came to terminals, so that way you could do easier servicing. But you can see we have the inertia switch and everything, and above that, just to show you some of the restoration, you have first aid kit, the map case, everything is there. So this is the other kind of piece of the puzzle that's going to help us complete the aft restoration. I'm telling you, the last 3 years, I think Amy would agree, it's gone from an empty airplane back there to a lot of stuff has happened.
Yeah, it's been quite the transformation.
And I don't know if we have another photo or not here. So the very last one I wanted to share that we're kind of excited here at the Minnesota wing is we're having the shelf made for the Gibson Girl. The Gibson Girl was a survival radio, that had the Gibson Girl shape. And that we have the bag, we have everything. What we don't have is there's a tube that had the kite in it. So if anybody has one of those, we're looking for it. They're extraordinarily rare, but I know people have these, just sitting in their basements. There's that, and there was a parachute on top. We'd rather not have to fabricate it, but it's really an important part to have on the airplane. So that hopefully that will be done, and that'll be going this year too. Some of these things, have been sitting in storage, and it's all about having people that are willing to donate and allow us to continue with our restoration mission. And I think that's it that I have for photos to let our viewers kind of know what we're doing with restoration. To give you an idea, like we mentioned, this started in the very early 80s, so now we're 40 years into it. And I don't know what you think, Amy, but probably another 5-6 years maybe to go. Maybe we'll go 46, 47 years. There's a few other large ticket items that would like to do on the airplane. But, it's been pretty amazing when you think the amount of men and women that have worked on this from the 1980s until now. And the baton just keeps getting kind of traded off to the next group and the next group. And I feel honored I've been with the CAF for about 9 years, and I've been honored to be part of that group, that succession of stewardship of these airplanes.
Yeah, our current crew chief, Larry Utter, he was actually taught everything that he knows by the World War II guys. So Ray and all the other guys taught him everything, and then he's passing it on to the next generation of guys. And so it's a very cool legacy to be a part of.
Yeah, it really is. I'm blown away a lot of times every time I go there to volunteer.
Yeah.
Well, we have a couple of questions that have come in. The first one is, did Miss Mitchell fly in Camarillo, California a few years back? Have you been that far west?
We have not been to California, no.
So it could have, well, I guess it wouldn't have been the PBJ from the Southern California wing. It's only been, well, I guess that has been flying a couple of years, so maybe that was it that they saw.
We have made it up to Alaska, though.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What was that flight for?
We did one of the air shows in Fairbanks, I believe, and I think it was like a 3-day trip up there. Yeah, that was in the late 90s, early 2000s, I think. They said it was a great trip, though.
I can only imagine, yeah. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the story of the bomb assessment damage camera, where that came from, and how it got to be inside the airplane?
That one, I believe they found that one on eBay, did they not?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that. It was in a sealed box. I mean, it had not been opened since 1944 when it was sealed by Kodak.
Yeah,
it's amazing the things you find on eBay.
Yeah. We did a search for it, and we happened to come across it, and I think we offered the guy a price, and we said it's for a museum, and he was like, yeah, sure, sounds great. And we had no idea when it showed up that it was going to be in the original box, which was just so cool. I think we kept the box for a long time until we were like, what are we going to do with this box?
Well, this came out of the Netherlands, so it took a couple of months to get through the mail process and stuff, but yeah, that's where they came from.
It's awesome. Let's talk a little bit about the interiors. We're looking at the final pictures that we were looking at. The camera is relatively deceiving as to the size of the fuselage there, isn't it?
I mean, it's about yay big. It's a good size. I can't even imagine what that would cost in today's dollars to make, because the optics are this big on it, and to be able to have it that perfectly ground, especially what they would have had to go through in the 1940s, it'd be a fair amount of money.
Jim said it came from Amsterdam.
Okay.
Isn't technology great?
I know. I love eBay and technology.
Let's see. Another question here. You mentioned the lettering stencils. Are those reusable? And would they possibly be available for others that are restoring a Mitchell or would like to add paint to their airplane? I think they're wondering if the templates could be loaned out or easily copied. Kind
of, but they're basically on cardboard. So the way we ended up doing it was we acquired the stamps, the presses to cut them, and we ended up cutting them as we went along, because they had a distinct the points, the size. So, but as far as being able to reuse, they end up having like 4 coats of paint on them already. So you're going to end up losing that razor's edge that you need for stenciling. So if somebody was going to do it, I'd recommend that they start from scratch. it really wouldn't be worth reusing them.
All right. Another question was how many B-25s are in the CAF fleet? I'll test you. Do you either one of you know?
I'm going to go with 5, only because I just saw Mitch's hand. No.
It's actually 6, but who's counting?
I mean, there's other B-25s except for Miss Mitchell?
I know. It's hard to believe. There's a few out there. They're all very well loved by their crews as well.
They are. They are. It's very true.
One of the things I've always found fascinating about the B-25 is, unlike a B-17, which is the bomb bay is open, the B-25 is closed, which brings us back to that sort of the tunnel that goes between the back end and the front end.
Yeah, and it's very tricky to crawl back and forth through there, so I can't imagine doing that in flight on a bombing mission.
Yeah, I mean, we've done it.
Yeah.
I did it when I was just a few pounds lighter, but there is a hatch. So
yeah. You can kind of see it midway up. There's a big red hatch, so you can get through the.
It would have been made out of phenolic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see. I think there it is, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, so they could get to it if they needed to during flight. It's not a very big hatch, though.
And one thing we do have is we do have the hoist mechanisms, and I think there's a few little parts that we'd like to get, but you know, because that was cranked, they were attached from the outside at the different stations, and then you ended up hoisting the bombs in place. You pulled them up.
You mentioned the noise factor in the B-25. I've not had the opportunity to fly in one, but I've heard from folks who have that it is kind of a noisy experience.
A little bit. A little noisy. You definitely want to keep on your headset.
Yeah, I mean, a lot. You know, it's no wonder that that's all wore hearing aids later in life. It's pretty bad.
Yeah,
I don't think we have any. Well, actually, we do. Part of the noise factor is the fact that you've got short stacks on the engines, which really allow the engine noise to permeate right through, especially being so close to the cockpit there.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, the nose isn't bad. If you're up in the nose, it's actually a little bit quieter up there. But it definitely is loud in the back.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
So what's in store for Miss Mitchell this year? Are you looking forward to being able to do some air shows and things this year?
We certainly hope so. We're still working on kind of the schedule of events. Obviously, it's we're still in the middle of everything going on, so it's a little trickier at the moment. But we're trying to host some of our own events. We're for sure going to be doing the fall dance. So if you haven't seen Miss Mitchell, you should come and check her out for it. And then, we're working on trying to just get back to kind of the air show circuit. We are doing a lot of local flyovers as well. We do flyovers for a lot of funerals, Memorial Day flyovers, that kind of thing, which is always really cool for just the Twin Cities, because you can't mistake, like we just talked about, you can't mistake those engines, and people come running out of their house as soon as they hear her coming overhead. So, but it should be a decent year for us to get back into.
Well, good. And as things hopefully return to normal, what's the procedure for being able to book flights on the airplane?
That is a good question. We are still taking reservations for her. If we get a family of 6 that wants to go, we can send them. And we're just being more cautious with other people because obviously there's a risk that people have to take if they're less than 6 feet apart. So we're kind of just taking it one reservation at a time. But if somebody's interested, we'll gladly take their call and try to make something work.
All right, a few more questions from our viewers. I guess, how high can these airplanes fly? And that's really, I guess the B-25 can get up 25,000 feet if you really wanted to, but for the most part, operations these days are pretty low compared to what it was during the war.
Yeah, the B-25, I mean, its claim to fame is not higher altitude missions. It's you know, a lot of times they didn't have oxygen. They weren't wearing oxygen. Even in, you know, in Corsica, a lot of times it was just regular. So if you kind of look at all the missions, you know, the Pappy gun and all that sort of stuff, it's claimed to fame as low level, mid to low level. But visions for oxygen. I mean, they had all that was a lot of that was moved when it went, you know, to Europe.
Yeah.
What do you normally operate when you're going cross country?
What, probably 3,000 to 5,000, I would think. Something like that. It depends on where we're going. I think probably a little bit higher if we're going like down to Texas for the air show or something like that. We'll cruise a little bit higher just to stay out of everybody's way. But I'd say locally probably 3 to 5.
Okay. Any plans to be a Thunder over Michigan this year?
Possibly. Who's asking?
The question's just there. I don't know.
That's hopefully one of the shows we're going to be at. And as soon as we get everything confirmed, we'll have the confirmed list on our website and on social media too. So check back in with us.
Now, along with Miss Mitchell, you mentioned the Navion. You have other aircraft in your fleet as well, right?
We do. Yeah, we've got a beautifully restored BT-13. We've got an SNJ, an L5, and a PT-22. And then we've got another airplane that is in boxes that we're going to start eventually, and that's a PT-19. So we've run out of space currently to restore something. So we're going to finish the Navion first and then get to the PT-19.
And you mentioned the hangar dance. The hangar itself is also an artifact as well.
Yeah, the hangar itself, the field was actually used during World War II, and the hangars were built in preparation for the war. So our hangar was built in 1938-39. So it's the beautiful wood bowstring hangar, best acoustics you'll ever hear for a dance. But it's a cool piece of history as well to be at Fleming Field.
Tell us a little bit about the hangar dances. I mean, it's quite an affair, well attended,
Yes.
but also a lot of enthusiastic young people have sort of joined the bandwagon, the big bandwagon, as it were, in the past few years.
Yeah, we get a wide variety of people from, you know, high school age kids to, you know, the veterans, you know, in their 80s and 90s dancing. We have a 16-piece big band that comes in, Roseville Big Band. We've got a dance lesson from a TC Swing. So if you don't know how to dance, they'll teach you how to dance. And then the dancing starts. We've got a local radio personality who's our MC. We've got food. We've got beer that's donated from Indeed Brewing. And it's a great time. And we usually, if the aircraft are available, we'll do an engine run up with the B-25 or some of the singles, which is always a crowd pleaser.
Do you have a date for the fall dance yet?
We do. It's the second Saturday in September. It's September 11th, and we do have one for June too. It's June 12th.
Okay.
But we're kind of watching how things are going, and right now it's scheduled, and we'll keep everybody updated as it gets closer.
Good. A few more questions here. Here's a good one. Do people freak out when they see a B-25 at an airport? Now, as an airplane person, I take freak out as a good thing when it comes to airplanes. Like, oh wow, that's a B-25. Other people might not be.
I mean, you always get a reception. I mean, even if you stop for a fuel stop, I mean, you've got the police, yeah, always an entourage that shows up as soon as you land.
Yeah, I think people are amazed and they aren't always sure what it is. So freak out in a good way, yes.
Yeah.
And a little more trivia for you, and we'll see how we do on this one. Why are some silver and some green, the B-25s?
Simply during the production, they eventually found out they didn't need to waste the weight and the resources of the paint, and they kind of have a line in the sand where they stopped putting paint on them. But the same thing happened on B-29s. You know, they were green and then they went all silver, and the same thing that happened to 17s, and it was just a waste of resources, none needed. And then, of course, they would paint them in theater sometimes.
Sure.
If needed, but that's a lot of weight and cost.
Yeah, it is.
Any recommendations on good opportunities to take photos of airplanes like the B-25?
Well, I guess it depends on where you are. You can check headquarters website. They've got a list of every single unit across the United States and internationally. And so you can find out if there's one in your area and then head out to your local airport and go visit us.
We do a photo day twice a year.
Yeah, so we actually have one locally. We're going to do one in April, I think April or May, and then we'll do one in October. But we do a day where you can come and bring your vintage vehicle, your modern vehicle, whatever. You can bring your family and just come and take photos with Miss Mitchell.
As things are sort of in a state of flux, and different states opening different times, things, how do people keep in touch with what's happening with the Minnesota wing?
So we have our open dates and our policies posted right on the homepage. So if anybody has any questions, it's right there. Right now, we're only open one day a month through March, and then we're going to evaluate in April. Basically, as the weather gets warmer, we have more flexibility to open up and have more space for people. But you can always call or email, or you can visit us on Facebook and send us a message that way. But we try to keep the website completely updated so that everybody knows when we're open.
Good. What's that website address?
It's www.cafmn.org.
Good. Well, we've cleaned up all the questions we have. I'll just ask Amy and Mitch, any final thoughts tonight?
I guess, yeah, thanks for having us, and and thank you the viewers that tuned in to watch us. And if you haven't followed us on Facebook or liked us, make sure you do that, because we'll have other things. We have other things planned throughout the year to keep people apprised of how we're coming along in restoration and happenings in the museum. So yeah, keep following us. Amy, any last words? Putting in a plug for joining the wing?
I second that. But yes, you can become a volunteer. You can come join us and become a member. You don't have to be a pilot or a mechanic. We have lots of other things that you can do to keep busy and be a part of something really special. So again, you can visit us. Our website is www.cafmn.org to find out more.
All right, Mitch, Amy, thank you for joining us tonight. And thank you to the audience for joining us for another CAF Warbird Tube webinar. If you have any ideas or aircraft you'd like us to talk about in future episodes, or a veteran or someone else who has interesting stories that we'd like to share, please drop Leah Block a note at media@cafhq.org. We'll be back next Wednesday night, 7 o'clock Central. Until then, thanks again to Amy and Mitch. I'm Steve Buss. Have a great night.